The Imperator's observation chamber was silent except for the soft hum of the Kethri Dominion scanners, machines so precise they could peel apart the atomic layers of a starship without disturbing a single molecule. Commander Vestal stood at the center dais, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the holographic sphere forming above the console. To him, this should have been routine. Humans were new to the galactic map, energetic, disorderly, technologically crude. The Dominion viewed them as an adolescent species that had risen too fast, too curious for their own stability. The scan today was meant only to confirm that assumption. When the anomaly first appeared on long-range detection, Vestal expected a cargo vessel or perhaps one of those lightly armed human escorts that had been poking into contested trade lanes. But the energy reading was too concentrated, the silhouette too clean. As the image resolved, even the senior analysts exchanged uneasy glances. A warship, human-built, deep in frontier space, traveling alone. Begin surface analysis. Vestal ordered, his tone calm, but the way his tendrils twitched revealed a hint of curiosity. The outer hull data streamed in immediately. It was nothing like they predicted. Humans were supposed to build ships with compensatory bulk, thick plates, uneven distribution, crude alloys. But this? The density was unnatural for a vessel of its size, as if every section had been deliberately over-engineered. The hull seemed grown rather than assembled, layers of metal fused with composites the analysts couldn't categorize instantly. Calibration error? One officer murmured. Recalibrate and run again, Vestal said. The second scan produced identical numbers. Before anyone could interpret the anomaly, the scanners pushed deeper. Structural lines glowed within the projection, beams, reinforcement ribs, tension transfer channels, yet none aligned with standard design logic. Humans had built a ship that looked almost angry in its purpose. Robust beyond necessity. Reinforced beyond reason. Every meter of internal structure carried redundancies that would have been dismissed in Dominion engineering as a waste of resources. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Well, Vestal muttered, they've certainly committed to overcompensation. Still, he didn't feel threatened. Not yet. The Kethri had encountered many young species who built with fear, species whose entire engineering philosophy revolved around catastrophic failures they barely understood. Humans, he assumed, were no different. Fear-driven, instinct-driven, chaotic. But the next readings contradicted every stereotype. Thermal traces indicated the ship's systems running hotter than Dominion models allowed, yet nothing failed. Nothing even faltered. Heat distribution was nearly flawless, as if the vessel embraced strain instead of resisting it. The reactor signature pulsed through the hologram, a steady, rhythmic heartbeat rather than the chaotic sputter Dominion analysts expected from human tech. Commander, a technician called out, voice tight. Their reactor is operating at levels that should be unstable for a ship of that scale. Should be, Vestal repeated, tasting the words. But isn't. The skin output poured in faster than the analysts could digest. Compartment layouts, power routes, emergency lines, shield relays, structural dampeners. Every component seemed built with a singular philosophy. This ship will not fail. Not quickly. Not cleanly. Not in any way an enemy would find convenient. Human arrogance, Vestal thought. Or human stubbornness. Both were dangerous. Then came the biosignature preview. Only a preliminary outline, not yet a full deep read, but enough to set the chamber buzzing again. The life support reservoirs were calibrated for intense atmospheric cycling, far more than any known species tolerated. The emergency bulkheads were reinforced to withstand internal explosions. The medbay was positioned centrally, protected by triple-fold armor. Why does a ship require this many internal safeguards? An officer whispered. Vestal understood before anyone said it. Because they anticipate catastrophe, he answered. And they build expecting to survive it. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't fear. It was preparation on a level that made the Dominion look almost complacent. He studied the hologram, and for the first time in decades, felt something sharpen behind his ribs. Not fear. Not yet. But awareness, an unfamiliar pressure that told him this scan would not end the way he expected. "Proceed to deep scan," he said quietly. "Let's see what kind of minds build a ship like this." The hum of the scanners deepened, and the chamber lights dimmed. For the first time in Kethri memory, the unknown felt uncomfortably close. The deep scan pierced the vessel's hull layer by layer, dissolving every assumption the Dominion held about human engineering. The first internal sweep displayed armor thickness far beyond its apparent mass. The material composition shifted unpredictably across the hull. Dense metals blended with shock-absorbing compounds, interlaced with composites the scanners struggled to classify. The ship wasn't built with elegance in mind, it was built to endure. Every centimeter suggested a philosophy utterly foreign to Dominion design. Failure is expected, so prepare for the worst long before it arrives. The structural lattice emerged next, and Eve and Veshta leaned in. Human ships were supposed to be crude. This one was anything but. Support beams crisscrossed the vessel like the bones of a creature designed by evolution rather than intention. Each major route, power, coolant, oxygen, had 2 or 3 alternatives branching beside it. Damage to one segment wouldn't cripple the ship, the load would simply reroute. Dominion engineers favored efficiency, trusting automation and predictive systems to prevent disaster. Humans had chosen a harsher logic, assumed disaster is inevitable, then build so it does nothing. Weapon analysis generated the first audible gasp. The bow-mounted mass drivers whose recoil forces should have torn through the spine of a ship this size. Yet moments later, the scanners revealed why they didn't. Hidden structures reinforced the central frame with tension dampeners placed at mathematically odd intervals. Dominion doctrine treated structural stability like a controlled equation. Humans treated it like a brawl. Brace for the hit, take it full on, then return one twice as strong. Rail assemblies ran along armored troughs supported by heavy bracings that looked as if they were meant to survive direct internal impact. Energy weapons filled the midsections. Arrays of lasers layered in a sequence no Kethri designer would approve, modular pieces, overlapping fields, deliberately redundant. They lacked the sophistication of Dominion emitters, yet they offered relentless coverage. If one burned out, another would fire instantly. The intention was obvious. Humans valued continuous aggression over peak efficiency. The reactor chamber forced the analysts to halt the stream momentarily just to verify accuracy. 2 full cores sat side by side, one primary, one backup, each contained in its own armored enclosure. The secondary core was not dormant. It was idling, ready to take over without transition. Dominion vessels used a single hyper-optimized reactor supported by fail-safes. Humans placed a second heart inside their ship, fully prepared to run both if the situation demanded. The power conduits were thick, ungainly, and brutally direct. No unnecessary optimization. No delicate balancing. Just raw reliability. Veshta studied the map of heat flow. Instead of cooling systems designed for graceful dispersion, the human vessel used aggressive internal venting, feeding excess heat into reserve systems that could repurpose it for emergency boosts. Temperatures the Dominion considered unsafe were normal operating levels aboard this warship. Human engineers accepted stress the way predators accept scars, proof of survival, not signs of fragility. Compartment layouts carried that same ethos. Medical bays were buried deep within the ship, encircled by reinforcement rings that could withstand sustained internal damage. Barracks were spaced so that if one section was destroyed, the others would remain fully functional. Every room had independent life support cycles. Firewall corridors isolated sections instantly. Even the corridors curved in subtle ways that forced blast pressure to deflect rather than funnel. One detail drew Veshta's attention more than anything, a pattern engraved into several crossbeams, too faint to be decorative. After magnification, it became clear, not ornamentation, but small inscriptions marking prior battles. Names of engagements. Locations. Losses. Survival notes. The ship was not merely a tool, it was a chronicle. Humans had built memory into metal. The scan continued with a final pass over the command bridge. Here the Dominion expected complexity, layers of psychic interfaces or advanced neural handlers. Instead, they found consoles rugged enough to be operated with damaged hands, manual overrides on every station, physical switches in case of system failure. Dominion arrogance faltered. Humans had not built this ship to trust fate or technology. They had built it to function even when every system was shattered, even when every automated support failed. Beheld exhaled slowly. He understood now why the vessel unsettled him. Every choice humans made reflected a single truth: they do not plan for perfection, they plan to survive catastrophe. And anything that plans that thoroughly for catastrophe is prepared to create one. The bioscan initiated with the same clinical precision as before, but the results were nothing like the Dominion expected. The first life sign projections displayed heart rates far above Kethery norms, spiking, leveling, then spiking again with a rhythm that suggested controlled volatility rather than instability. Human physiology registered as something molded by pressure rather than hindered by it. Their metabolisms ran hotter, faster, and with a margin for pain tolerance that made the analysts shift uncomfortably. Muscle density measurements triggered recalibration twice. Human frames, though smaller and visually unimposing compared to most galactic species, contained fiber patterns built for endurance over brute strength. Predators capable of chasing prey until it collapsed. Their circulatory systems were adapted for sudden bursts of exertion and rapid stabilization. Stress chemicals rose sharply, but neural responses showed trained suppression, the kind born not from instinct but from discipline. Beheld leaned closer as neural activity patterns were rendered. Dominion scientists prided themselves on calm, ordered thought. Human neural maps were chaos by comparison, millions of connections firing in unpredictable patterns, yet those patterns produced astonishing adaptability. Under strain, their brains didn't lock into rigid pathways. They rewired. They adjusted. They reinterpreted threat as challenge. Fear didn't cripple them, it sharpened their choices. The skin shifted to behavioral data taken from the ship's current cycle. Micro-expressions, movement patterns, speech cadences, all fed into the Dominion's analytical engine. The crew displayed an emotional range the Kethery found alien. Humor threaded through tension, camaraderie in moments where most species demanded solemnity, and a casual acceptance of danger that bordered on ritual. Humans checked on one another not out of hierarchy but out of instinctive solidarity. Every small gesture reinforced collective stability. A particularly long waveform caught the analyst's attention, the captain's neural signature. Calm yet alert, shaped by experience that carried both scars and resolve. Dominion commanders trained for centuries to manage emotional regulation. Humans did it through lived hardship, yet their stability under fire rivaled engineered discipline. The captain's decisions flowed through the ship like a steady current, grounding the crew with a confidence that was neither forced nor ceremonial. Mission logs were next, and here the Kethery officers finally lost their composure. Visual fragments displayed humans fighting through scenarios that should have ended in annihilation, fires raging in zero gravity, breached hulls sealed by improvised plating, wounded crew dragging themselves to stations without hesitation. In one recording, 2 engineers manually stabilized a failing plasma conduit with nothing but reinforced suits and raw determination. The log ended with both surviving, laughing despite injuries that would have hospitalized most species. "What compels them to continue operating under such conditions?" an analyst whispered. Beheld had no answer. Psychological modeling attempted to categorize the crew using Dominion metrics, but the system kept fluctuating. Humans held paradoxes, individualistic yet deeply cooperative, aggressive yet protective, emotional yet controlled in crisis. Their motivations were not rooted in obedience or fear of authority. They fought for each other. That kind of loyalty had no logical containment. A crew bound by shared struggle had a resilience no enforced hierarchy could simulate. Medical data deepened the unsettling picture. Human bodies recovered faster than predicted, cell repair accelerated under stress, immune responses amplified during trauma. They accepted pain as part of functionality rather than a signal to cease activity. Dominion species paused at injury. Humans adapted around it, and continued. The final bioscan sweep detected elevated readiness levels across the crew. Not panic. Not aggression. Just a coordinated shift toward alertness. Subtle physiological cues suggested they sensed the Dominion's presence, not through technology, but through intuition sharpened by a lifetime of navigating unpredictable environments. "They know something is happening," an officer said quietly. The realization settled over the chamber. Humans didn't merely survive chaos, they were shaped by it. They carried within them a psychology built on overcoming disaster, not avoiding it. They adapted faster than systems could predict. They refused to break even when their bodies should fail. Beheld felt the first true spark of fear. A species that reshaped itself under pressure was not one the Dominion could intimidate. Their strength was not in superior technology or refined strategy. It was in an inner force no algorithm could quantify. A ship full of beings like this meant only one thing: if conflict came, humanity would not yield. They would endure, advance, and outlast, driven by a will that shook every assumption the Dominion held about dominance. "You said?" The moment the bioscan finished, a subtle fluctuation rippled across the Dominion displays. A faint energy spike, almost insignificant, appeared beside the human vessel. Analysts dismissed it as background interference, until it repeated, stronger, clearer, unmistakably intentional. Beheld's tendrils stiffened. "Confirmed source." The room fell silent as instruments recalibrated around the anomaly. The reading resolved into a focused directional pulse, primitive compared to Dominion stealth scans, yet precise in its alignment. The humans were probing back. Not blindly. Not randomly. Purposefully. "That's impossible," a technician muttered. "Our vessel is completely masked." The Dominion stealth systems were unmatched. Layered energy dampeners, spectral filters, distortion fields. No young species should detect them, much less respond. Yet the pulse intensified, adapting to the distortion field as if narrowing in on its target through instinct rather than instrumentation. The communication panel lit up an instant later. A narrow band signal, brute force through encryption layers by sheer stubborn stability. The message was short, stripped of ornament, almost cold in its clarity. "Unidentified vessel. You scanned us without permission. Discontinue immediately." No threats. No warnings about retaliation. The voice carried nothing but steady authority. Humans were not seeking confrontation, they were establishing boundaries. Dominion officers exchanged unsettled looks. A species that could respond calmly under provocation was far more dangerous than one that panicked or postured. Beheld requested an energy analysis of the human ship's systems. The results confirmed what his instincts already sensed. The warship had shifted power subtly, diverting energy along its hull, balancing between propulsion and weapons. Not charging aggressively, but preparing to respond instantly if needed. Their posture conveyed a message without saying it aloud: "We do not start conflict, but we will not be taken easily." The Dominion vessel's cloak flickered under the human probe. Not enough to reveal its shape, but enough to disrupt the perfect invisibility the Ketheri relied upon. Humans lacked the refinement to fully penetrate stealth tech, yet they compensated through adaptability, pushing, testing, adjusting with each pulse. "What are they using to track us?" another officer whispered. "Improvised sensing, most likely," someone replied. "They're stitching together variations in our field emissions." Beheld felt an unfamiliar pressure in his chest. Humans were deducing their location from tiny inconsistencies and distortion patterns, details no species had ever detected. The Dominion invested centuries into perfecting stealth. Humans were breaking through it with stubborn intuition and raw determination. The human vessel transmitted a second message, this time broader in bandwidth. "We recognize observation signatures. State your intent." Again, no panic. No submission. No bluster. Just a clear expectation of honesty. The Dominion prided itself on psychological superiority, every first contact scenario carefully measured, every species assessed before engagement. But humanity was bypassing that hierarchy entirely. They were refusing the role the Dominion tried to impose. They are not acting like a lesser species, Beheld murmured. They're acting like an equal. Weapon diagnostics confirmed the human ship's next move. Turrets adjusted incrementally, covering escape vectors rather than offensive angles. Rail systems charged to minimum safe readiness. Shield emitters synchronized in quiet anticipation. Everything about their preparation was precise, efficient, and unflinchingly calm. The Dominion officers grew tense. They were accustomed to either aggression or fear from younger civilizations. This composed readiness defied both. Humans were ready to fight if cornered, but they preferred clarity over chaos. They would not fire first, yet they showed no hesitation to return force with overwhelming intensity. A tactical analyst whispered the final confirmation. They've mapped our position. Not perfectly, but close enough to act. The implications settled heavily in the chamber. This was no reckless species fumbling with unfamiliar tools. Humans had detected an invisible observer and responded with discipline sharpened by experience. Beheld studied the human ship's energy signature one last time. Everything about it, its construction, its crew, its posture, reflected a singular truth: humans did not survive by accident. They survived because they treated every unknown as something to confront directly. In that moment, he understood the danger. Humanity wasn't just capable of detecting the Dominion. They were capable of resisting them. And any species that faced the unknown with such unwavering steadiness was one the galaxy could not intimidate. The HFY vessel held its position, silent but exposed. The humans waited, patient, watchful, unshaken. The balance had shifted, and every officer felt it. The observers had become the observed. Silence settled inside the Dominion vessel after the last human transmission. No threats followed, no escalation, just that steady demand for clarity. The HFY officers waited for Beheld's decision, though none would voice the question aloud. The deep skin had revealed a species that refused to conform to any Dominion expectation. The counterskin proved they were willing to confront the unknown without submission or panic. Now came the point where a misstep could ignite a conflict either side intended. Beheld studied the composite image of the human warship one last time. Every beam, every redundant system, every reinforced corridor reflected the same philosophy their actions now demonstrated. Humans did not posture, they prepared. They did not bluff, they persisted. They offered warning instead of hostility, discipline instead of fear. That level of resolve was something the Dominion usually associated with ancient powers, not newcomers barely stepping beyond their local cluster. He ordered the scanners powered down to their lowest setting. Officers hesitated, surprised. Retreating from an inferior species was unprecedented, yet the evidence was undeniable. The Dominion could dominate lesser civilizations with intimidation or technological superiority, but humanity was neither intimidated nor outmatched in spirit. A confrontation would not end quickly. It would spiral. Cease all observation, Beheld commanded. We withdraw. The words felt heavier than they sounded. The bridge officers executed the order with rigid precision, but their unease lingered. Stealth systems recalibrated, propulsion aligned for a silent vector away from human space. As they drifted backward into deeper shadow, the human vessel remained steady, no trace of pursuit or aggression, only that vigilant readiness that seemed innate to their nature. A faint pulse crossed the Dominion sensors. Not a scan, not a threat, just a brief fluctuation in the human ship's field, sending a subtle signal of acknowledgement. A goodbye, perhaps. A statement that they had noticed the retreat and accepted it without humiliation or gloating. Dominion officers exchanged quiet looks. Humanity had shown restraint precisely where other species would have flaunted victory. As the distance grew, Beheld accessed the compiled assessment, thousands of metrics compressed into a single report. Instead of chaos, the data presented a coherent picture. Humans were generalists capable of transforming adversity into strategy. Their biology favored adaptation. Their technology favored resilience. Their psychology favored unity under pressure. No species the Dominion had encountered carried all three traits simultaneously. The strategic implications were immense. A civilization built on that triad would expand with relentless momentum. They would explore beyond fear. They would defend beyond logic. And if forced into conflict, they would wage it with an intensity that eclipsed the calculations of more controlled minds. He opened a secure channel to the Dominion High Council. The transmission required careful crafting. One misinterpretation could push the Empire toward an unnecessary confrontation. Veshtel reported the findings without embellishment. Humanity possessed a danger level disproportionate to their technological tier, not because of superior weaponry, but because of a near indestructible drive. Their resilience made them an unpredictable variable in any future contest for territory. His final recommendation was simple: avoid provocation. Engage diplomatically. Monitor cautiously. Any attempt to dominate them would generate escalating resistance. The Council responded with surprise, skepticism, then concern. They trusted Veshtel's judgment, and for the first time in centuries, the Dominion issued a restraint order regarding a rising species. Long after the channel closed, Veshtel remained at the viewport, watching the faint glimmer of the human vessel fade from detectable range. He felt no shame in the retreat. Dominion pride valued precision, but wisdom lay in recognizing when a calculated risk had become an avoidable disaster. Humans were not prey, not subjects, not unstable primitives. They were a force shaped by hardship, strengthened by unpredictability, and united by instincts the Dominion could neither suppress nor predict. On the far side of the battlefield that never happened, the human warship resumed its course through the stars, unaware of the seismic shift its presence had caused. The Dominion's networks soon carried whispers, rumors of a vessel that stood firm under scrutiny, a crew that met the unseen with steady resolve, a species whose ships were built to outlast extinction. The legend grew quickly, carried by officers who had never known fear from a young race. They repeated the words Veshtel recorded in his private notes. Humanity is not dangerous because of what they build. Humanity is dangerous because of who they are. Across the Dominion, that line became both warning and prophecy. And in the quiet expanse of deep space, the ship that sparked it all traveled onward, forging a reputation that would echo across every charted star.